Alright, welcome to my Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, no deflecting, no blocking, no damage guided walkthrough, in which I'm going to show you how to survive against all of the mandatory bosses and mini-bosses of the Shura ending route, without using the core fighting mechanic of this game. And if there was any doubt left that Sekiro is not like a Souls game, then this type of playthrough will make that very clear. So a warning for anyone who wants to try this challenge, this is for masochists only. In fact, I myself completely underestimated how difficult this playthrough would be. But despite that, I still wanted to do each fight without taking damage, because when I practiced in the previous new game cycle, I had a quite easy time, but not because I did well, but simply because it was more about being aggressive enough to out-damage the boss before I ran out of healing items. Also, anyone who has seen my blind playthrough of this game knows that I was quite stubborn and kind of refused to focus on deflecting until very late in the game. And I was still quite successful despite that, which is why I wanted to try this type of challenge in the first place. However, there's a major difference between not focusing on deflecting and blocking and not deflecting and blocking at all. Especially when no mistakes are allowed. So I want to emphasize before I begin, if you want to try this yourself, you will likely want to scratch your own eyeballs out in frustration against some of the bosses, especially Emma and Isshin. Because remember that this game was not designed to be played this way. And don't get fooled by how the fights look. It all looks a lot easier than it actually is. Especially because a lot of the fights are rather short. Also for that reason I will show some of the boss fights multiple times, because I have a lot to say and little time to say it. So first let's talk about the general principles of dodging in this game. Because as you will have realized yourself, the dodge is pretty bad. It's not like previous From Software titles where it's all about dodging through enemy attacks. In fact, although you do have iframes in this game, I find it unhelpful to think in those kind of terms. It's better to think in terms of dodgeable and undodgeable attacks. And as a general rule of thumb, dodgeable attacks are attacks that move forward. So stabs, overhead attacks and forward moving slices. And most attacks that go sideways are undodgeable. The exception tends to be right after a boss deflects you. And for most of the humanoid bosses, that is what you want to look out for. So when you attack a boss and you see the orange spark and you hear the deflect sound, that is your cue to do a sidestep. Or maybe a better way to say it is that is your best bet to dodge through a boss's attack. Because it can still require some pretty precise timing. Now you might think that dodging backwards would be more effective when you hardly have any iframes. But that often doesn't work, because most of the bosses are way too quick and have way too much reach. So rather than dodging backwards, you will need to run backwards or jump backwards. But even that will often not work mid-attack. That should be reserved for spacing, meaning staying away from a boss's attack to begin with. However, that should almost never be your focus. There are only a few bosses where you need to let them come to you. After all, when you're not allowed to block, if they attack first, more often than not with an undodgeable attack, the fight is immediately over. So you often need to focus on closing the distance and be the first one to attack, keep attacking until the boss deflects you, sidestep and attack again. And one final thing, I regard the Makiri counter as a type of deflecting as well, so that move is also not allowed in this playthrough. Okay then, I will let this fight play out and then I will show it again so I can break it down in detail. Alright, I make sure to be the first one to attack and I dodge to the right as soon as he deflects me. He follows up with a double slice attack. Don't try to counterattack when he does that, but do immediately close the distance again. When he runs to the right, he will do a sweep attack and I prefer to not jump on his head and just stay away. You can actually get some hits in before he does that sweep attack. I almost messed up because you could see me hesitate when closing the distance. I actually got lucky because when you don't close the distance when he steps backwards after he deflects you, he might be the first one to get an attack in, and that means you take a hit. When he does his giant combo, just stay back and attack as soon as he is finished. Now you could jump on his head when he does the sweep attack, but for some reason I just cannot help myself from moving away when I see the red kanji appear. But if you do, be careful because jumping on his head won't stun him for that long, so immediately watch out for a follow-up attack. When he jumps up, dodge twice and watch out for his follow-up attack. A stab in the first phase, a sweep attack during his second phase. Those are basically all of his moves. One final thing, the scariest time during all of the fights is when you reapply your buffs. Not only because you are vulnerable during that animation, but also because you need to stay away from the boss when using an item, and you need to make sure to get the first attack in again. So with the exception of this fight, the firecracker prosthetic is a very helpful way to make sure that you can get the first attack in. Alright, the first mandatory mini-boss is the Chained Ogre, and I didn't record this fight initially, so what you see here is actually on New Game Plus 4. After all, this fight isn't about blocking or deflecting in the first place. Same goes for the Blazing Bull later on. But just for the sake of completion, there you go. The flame prosthetic is extremely useful in this fight, especially coupled together with the Living Force skill. It does massive damage and it keeps the ogre stunned for several seconds. Other than that, pretty much all of his attacks are easy to sidestep, with the exception of his jumping grab attack. When he does that, run backwards to simply stay out of his reach altogether. The hitbox on that grab is kinda bullshit. You might not expect it, but under these restrictions, Gyoubu Oniwa is actually one of the hardest bosses in the game, as almost all of his attacks are completely undodgeable. I mainly rely on my flame prosthetic, and you can actually get a free charged attack in before he has the chance to attack you, because that spear twirling at the start is not actually an attack. The tricky thing about this fight is that you cannot outrun his horse, but you do have to stay somewhat in front of him when running away from him. Because if you are too much to his side, you're likely to get clipped by his spear attacks. You mainly want to stay away until you see the indicator for the grappling hook, but don't get greedy when attacking. He recovers quite fast and he has insane reach, so get 1 or 2 attacks in and run away again. You can get a few extra attacks in when he staggers, but unfortunately I tend to miss that opportunity because I'm so focused on running away again. Another reason you want to stay somewhat in front of him when running away is that this gives you the highest chance that he will do an attack where he stabs his spear into the ground, and that's also an opportunity for you to counterattack. Even so, he will hardly ever do that attack in the first place. It's a very rare attack. Now, one thing that is completely fucked up is the fact that you don't have iframes when using the grappling hook. So it can actually happen that you take a hit while grappling onto him. Which means that it's safer to jump before using the grappling hook. Although I don't do that myself in this fight. Well, it wouldn't be the first time that I advise you to do as I say and not as I do. Now, given that you are mostly running away from him, make good use of the flame prosthetic. Because when he is burning, he will slowly lose health without you having to do anything. The flame vent is much more helpful than the firecrackers, because especially during his second phase, he recovers way too quickly. Now, if you need extra spirit emblems, you can use the ceremonial Tanto. After all, the no damage qualifier is obviously about damage received from the boss and not damage inflicted upon yourself. This is that stab attack, but unfortunately I hesitated, so I was too late to counterattack. The only time to use firecrackers is when he runs all the way away from you and then runs back while he lowers his head and keeps his spear right beside his horse. Because then he will do a charge attack that is completely undodgeable, so use the firecrackers to interrupt it. The Blazing Bull is another fight that isn't about blocking and deflecting to begin with, although that can actually be done. But I suppose most people didn't fight him like that in their first playthrough, and neither did I. Now make sure to get rid of the soldiers first using Shuriken, because on the higher New Game Plus cycles, those enemies can actually survive the boss's first attack. And then it's all about sticking to the boss's butt. It can be helpful though to do charge R1 attacks, because stabs have a tendency to sometimes hit the boss in the head, even when you attack him from behind. And his head takes way more damage. But in the end, it's simply all about sticking behind him, and whenever you can't, use the firecrackers to stun him. And if you're lucky, when he goes berserk when his life bar gets low, if he happens to hit a wall, he will actually knock himself out. Keep in mind, however, that you cannot spam the firecrackers. It will take quite a while before you can use it to stun him again. Alright, the key to fighting the armored warrior is to constantly try to get behind him. Don't try to dodge through his attacks. Dodging is about getting completely away from his sword. Try to make sure that Sekiro does not come in contact with his sword at all. The axe is the best way to build up his posture, but of course keep in mind that that's a very slow attack. The main difficulty in this fight is the arena, because when the knight is near the edge, there may not be enough room to turn around him. When he goes berserk, don't attack until he is finished, because you need to stick behind him during that entire combo. Only the last attack can be dodged through, but only when you are literally touching him. If there's any space between him and you are bound to take a hit anyway. I would say that this is an example of a fight that looks easier than it actually is. There's one attack that he didn't do in this fight that can be quite annoying, and that is his push attack, where he holds the blade of the sword with his left hand and does this short little shoving animation. That attack goes really fast and requires very precise timing to sidestep, but it can in fact be iframed. Alright, this fight is really simple in execution. When you see the white flash, sidestep, attack, move away, rinse and repeat. The only thing is that he can in fact troll you by doing a sidestep of his own, as you could see he did at the very start of the fight. Fortunately, that's a very rare move, and he didn't do it again during the rest of the fight. So that's really all there is to it. Alright, make sure to use a sugar before going into the second fight with Genichiro, because you don't have time to do that at the start. This fight is quite similar as before, but there are some differences. Also, he freaking trolled me at the start, as he practically always follows up with a roll attack after shooting an arrow, but he didn't this time. However, when he does, that roll attack can actually be iframed. I have no idea why I was hesitating here, and that could have easily got me hit. But the basic principle again is keep attacking until he deflects you and then do a sidestep. In other words, the follow-up attack after he deflects you is one that can be iframed. Now, something that will help a lot in this fight is to leave slight pauses between your attacks. It's like he doesn't know how to follow up and you can get some free hits in that way. Now, the hardest part of this fight is his triple arrow jump attack. You either have to immediately, and I mean immediately, slash him out of the air when he does that, or you have to push yourself past him also immediately when he jumps up. A millisecond of hesitation and the fight is over. Other than that, the fight is extremely similar to the prologue fight. However, this time you fight in a small arena, and when you get near the edge, there might not be enough room to dodge, so that's pretty fucked up. So try to not push him into a corner, but that's easier said than done, of course. Alright, when his lightning phase starts, he will always open with a jumping stab attack, which you would normally Mikiri counter, but this time dodge underneath him and use that opportunity to use a sugar. And then immediately go on the attack again. He has 2 lightning attacks, one using his bow that goes forward, meaning that when he jumps up you need to push yourself immediately past him. But the most dangerous attack is his lightning sword, because that goes sideways and needs to be iframed, and that requires some pretty strict timing. Now the reason I don't use the lightning counter is because that goes against the rules, because you take a little bit of lightning damage even when you successfully return it. Okay, even though the next fight is over before you know it, it was actually really tricky to figure out how exactly to do it without deflecting. After all, the Centipede's attacks cannot possibly be dodged. So it had to be done by stunning him. Which is easy enough during the first phase, but he actually slightly changes his attacks during the second phase. So what I do is that I throw Ash in his face and then immediately follow up with an Axe attack. However, during the second phase he will alternate which arm he starts his attack with. And if he uses his left arm to attack first, he will actually hit you while you are in the X animation. So what you need to do then is to dodge backwards when he attacks with his left arm and throw Ash again, given that he will then follow up with his right arm, meaning that you can safely get an X attack in. So it all looks really easy, and it actually sort of is, but figuring out how to execute it properly without getting hit, it took a while to figure out. During my first encounter with the Guardian Ape, I never even expected that you could block or deflect any of his attacks during this first phase. But apparently you can. So my approach in this fight is similar to how I fought him during my blind playthrough. The main difference is that I make good use of the flame prosthetic this time. You can do this fight rather quickly actually, but I prefer to simply be patient and wait for the right attacks that are easiest to punish. Namely the combo that ends in a jump attack, running under him when he throws his shit, and every time the grappling hook indicator shows up. So basically the key to the first phase is to stay away from the boss and wait for the right opportunity to strike. It's all about patience. Here's that combo that ends in a jump attack. Just run behind him when he jumps. When he throws shit, run underneath him. He has to wipe his ass afterwards, so that leaves him open for some attacks. Alright, his second phase is a bit trickier when you aren't allowed to deflect. Especially because you cannot take advantage of his falling slash attack that stuns him when you deflect it. Also, because I don't allow myself to take damage, his giant AoE attack can only be avoided by reacting immediately when that animation starts. Or alternatively, if you react too late, you can still avoid damage by running past him, because the AoE does not go in a perfect circle around him. It actually only goes slightly behind his back. That's especially important to remember during the second encounter later on in the game. The main attack that you want to punish is when he jumps forward and does a slow sideways swipe attack. When he does that, run to his left side, so right from your perspective. If you act too late, you can actually save yourself by jumping. His 4-hit combo where he slashes from side to side is pretty easy to dodge in this encounter because the area is so large, but that attack becomes his most dangerous and most frustrating attack when you fight him later on in the cave. And to emphasize again, patience is key. It's not a speedrun, you don't need to take any unnecessary risks. Alright, the fight against the camera ninja is really freaking annoying, even with half of his life removed from the start. While the basic principle still applies, just dodge when he deflects your attack. However, this time you need to be prepared to hold the circle button when dodging, so you can run away when he follows up with a combo. But the main problem of course is the camera and the lock-on that can suddenly screw you over. So be aggressive, because you want this fight to be over as soon as possible. Before you backstab Snake Eyes, make sure to take out all the other enemies in the area, and position yourself to the side that she was facing before using the charged Flame Vent attack. That way you won't get knocked back too far that you cannot activate Living Force. Dodge 2 or even 3 times to avoid the grab attack. That attack really sucks freaking hard. And strafe sideways to avoid the gunshots. And you can do a quick step right before she fires. Firecrackers really help to make sure that you can get the first attack in. Otherwise, it's very likely that she will hit you before you can hit her. When you encounter the Guardian Ape for the second time, his moveset is exactly the same as before, but what makes this fight a lot harder is the area. It looks large enough, but when he does the AoE, or his 4-hit sideways slashes combo, you tend to literally run up against the wall and take a hit. Now technically you can dodge the 4 slashes if you stand near his left leg and dodge forward and perfectly time it 4 times in a row. But that's not something you want to rely on, if you manage to pull it off at all to begin with. Also, save your spirit emblems for when the second ape shows up. By using the Laserlight Shuriken, you can focus on dodging the Guardian Ape while grinding down the brown ape's life bar from afar. Okay, now get ready for the second ape and try to take her down as fast as you can. The annoying thing of course is that you need to lock on to use your shuriken, but that means that you have less control over the camera to keep your attention on the Guardian Ape. Also keep in mind that you do need to do a death blow on the brown ape once you got a life bar all the way down. And what makes this fight actually unfair is that you might immediately take a hit as soon as you come out of the execution animation. So keep your fingers crossed that you can get away in time after executing the brown ape. But after that, the fight continues as before. If you have seen speedruns of this game, you know that there are ways to keep the corrupted monk stun locked for the entire fight. So that would work, of course, under these restrictions as well. But I wanted it to at least still be a fight. And as you will see, the Laserlight axe is already cheesy enough as it does massive damage. But the thing is that it's only effective 2 times, and the second time it doesn't stun the monk, so you can't just use the follow-up attack. Count 5 times when she spins, and after that get the second axe attack in. But as I said, it won't stun her now, so immediately move backwards. The illusion version of the monk mostly does short and slow combos, so that allows you to get some quick attack in after the end of a combo, and then move back again. But attacks that are especially good to bait are her jump attacks, which you will do a lot if you stay away from her. But you need to act very quickly, because you need to be behind her before she does the actual attack. Specifically the one with the white sweeping attack. That is not an attack that can be iframed, so you have to be already behind her. The downward slashing jump attack can be iframed, however it's such a small hitbox to begin with, so it's quite easy to get past it before it even hits the ground. Okay then, time for the finale, and I cannot overemphasize the difficulty of this boss fight under these restrictions. Emma herself is already a nightmare, and you have to beat her again each time you fail against Isshin. And both bosses are incredibly unpredictable, as they have several moves they can follow up with after they deflect your attack. And most of which require split-second reactions. And I have to advise against spamming firecrackers. Only use one at the start of each of the first 2 phases to get the first attack in and save the rest for Isshin's second life bar. So start with a firecracker to make sure that you can attack first. Then after she deflects your attack, be ready to dodge between 1 and 3 times in a row. Fortunately her sweep attacks and stabs are slow and therefore easy to dodge. However, her most dangerous attack is when she raises her arms to the side. Even though there are 3 ways to counter that move, your counter depends on how fast you are able to recognize and react to that move. You can jump as you saw me do, but that tends to fuck up the camera and the lock on, so that's very dangerous. The other ways are to immediately hit her when she raises her sword, because that will cancel her attack. However, if you are even a split second too late, she will poise right for your attack and the fight is over. The third option is to run past her and keep running, because she covers such a large area with that entire combo. So you might need to jump and or change direction due to the arena being rather small. And that's just the first phase of the fight. Isshin is a lot harder. For his first life bar, start off with the firecracker again, to get the first attack in. The timing on the dodges after he deflects your attack is a lot more strict than on other bosses. So that is especially frustrating. When he does the double overhead attack, be wary that he can sometimes troll you and slightly delay his second attack or even change direction. Be aggressive because you want him to deflect you and dodge to the left, which is not always possible when he's at the edge of the arena. However, Isshin can dodge you as well, which requires you to immediately dodge to the right after your attack misses. His second phase is the hardest part of the challenge because of the fire and another dodge animation on his part. Make good use of the firecrackers in this phase. In fact, when he charges the full arena fire AoE, you need to hit him with the firecracker to actually cancel that attack. Otherwise you're pretty much fucked. Be very careful of his side swipe attack after he does an overhead fire attack. So make sure to dodge just to be sure you don't get clipped. I will show you some parts again in a minute to break them down in a bit more detail, because a lot happens in a short time. This is his giant charge attack, so you absolutely need to hit him with a firecracker when he does that. There you saw one of his dodge animations, and whenever he does a fire attack, make sure that you don't receive any chip damage by touching the outer edge of the fire. I saved myself with the firecracker from his second type of dodge animation, and after that I finally managed to take him down. Now, because this fight is relatively short, it all looks way easier than this. But trust me, it is really freaking hard. So finally, let's look at some of his attacks in slow motion. This is the first type of dodge animation. You need to immediately recognize it when he does that and dodge to the right. And his second dodge is when he crouches down. This attack is a nightmare. It's basically his most dangerous attack. Because the timing to dodge the attack that follows is ridiculously strict. And you will likely need to recognize that he is crouching down while you are in an attack animation of your own. And then you have to wait a split second so your dodge animation takes place when his attack comes out. So it's very likely to take a hit here because you dodged too early. Or that you don't dodge at all because you fail to recognize that he even crouched down to begin with. This all happens very quickly in a really chaotic fight, and you will probably have a very sweaty butt crack to begin with. Finally, as I said, this attack is likely to end the fight as well, because you tend to think that you are already behind him, and then you just get hit at the very edge of the hitbox. It can be iframed, but like all of his attacks, the timing is very precise. So that's it, the end of the Shura route. No deflecting, no blocking and no damage taken. Very difficult challenge, especially because, as should be clear by now, this is not how the game was meant to be played. Sekiro is not about dodging. It's not a SoulsBorne game, but it can be played as one. It only takes a lot of pain and a lot of frustration. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, don't forget the notification bell, and make sure to check out my other videos as well. I have challenge guides for the SoulsBorne series, as well as a whole lot of other games. And if you are curious to see how I fared my first time in Sekiro, then make sure to check out my blind playthrough of the game. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.